Okay, tuberculosis or TB. Now, the cause of TB, it's a bacterial pathogen, not a virus, and the name of the pathogen is Mycobacterium tuberculosis. There is a second related pathogen called Mycobacterium bovis or M. bovis, which can also cause TB. Now, the transmission of TB is by airborne droplets. So it's a droplet infection. So it's when a person breathes in droplets of moisture that have been sneezed or coughed by somebody who's infected with the bacteria. Now then, if you are unlucky enough to breathe in M. bovis or M. tuberculosis, the first thing that happens is that you have a primary infection. Now, the primary infection is very mild. Often it produces very few symptoms, nothing more than a sort of cold or a slight fever. Okay, and then it subsides. Now, the reason for this is that the pathogens are breathed into the upper part of the lungs, and in a healthy, young, well-nourished person, the phagocytes, the phagocytic white blood cells, will quickly ingest and digest the bacteria, destroying most of them. So, phagocytes ingest and digest the pathogens, destroying most of them. Now, any pathogens that do remain in the lungs, unfortunately with TB, can remain dormant. So they're still alive, but they're not reproducing. Now, any bacteria that do invade the lungs, in the case of tuberculosis, because of the phagocytosis and the immune response that goes on, we end up with the bacteria being encased in scar tissue in a sort of spherical structure called a tubercle. That's why the disease is called tuberculosis. Now, if you look carefully on this chest x-ray here, there's a perfectly healthy looking lung. But if you look over here, and you have to look quite carefully, you can actually see a kind of round structure there. Okay, I'm going to circle it in a bigger circle. That is a rather large tubercle in somebody's lungs. Okay, so tubercles are basically a mass of scar tissue, and inside the scar tissue we have the TB bacteria, the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. If you look here, this is actually a photograph of a very heavily infected human lung, and each of these white dense structures, which are mainly scar tissue, is a tubercle. Now then, if you're unlucky enough in future years, if you do become immunosuppressed, and that could be because you've got having persistent infections, or it could be because you're on immunosuppressant drugs after surgery, or even actually with age, people's immune system does weaken, you can then develop what is known as the post-primary infection. Now, we never call that the secondary infection, because a secondary infection is something specific in biology. So it's the post-primary infection. Now, when the post-primary infection begins, the dormant bacteria will start to thrive, they will start to reproduce in the lungs, and they will form a large number of tubercles, a bit like this lung here, and the person will become quite poorly. Now, the main problems with this is that the bacteria actually destroy alveoli. That means that the surface area of the lungs is reduced. At the same time, healthy lung tissue is replaced with scar tissue. Okay, so healthy lung tissue replaced with scar tissue. and scar tissue is a lot thicker than the membranes of the alveoli, and so that actually increases diffusion distance. Now, the combined effect of the reduced surface area of alveoli and the thickening due to scarring and increasing diffusion distance actually reduces the rate of diffusion, so that gas exchange is slow and not enough oxygen gets into the lungs, not enough carbon dioxide is breathed out. Okay, I think I'll leave it there. Maybe I could have